What we believe becomes our truth, and our lens of perception paints our reality. However, you were brought up, odds are that somewhere along the way, certain beliefs were instilled in you to keep you safe. We've all had to learn how to get out of harm's way, and we later learn, even though we know how to stay safe, we somehow manage to get in our own way. It's always caused by our limiting beliefs, and it's reinforced by our emotions that we put behind them. As adults, once we become aware of our deep resistance and that thread of fear that grips us, it's only then we can start to shift. Understand what we believe becomes our truth. So if we think that the process to change our beliefs is going to be hard, it will be. If we think the process will take forever, it will. So let's approach this process of overcoming our limiting beliefs as simple and effective, and let it only take a few seconds to accomplish. And you can start to see that there's a shift in the body and how those statements start to resonate, and where the body might feel a little bit lighter. And we can start to believe that something is actually going to work in our favor if we set the right lens towards it. As a creator of our destiny, we decide how we want to see the reality of our world, and we decide how we're going to feel about it. And making that decision is life-changing. So the first step of overcoming a limiting belief is to acknowledge it. Some thoughts fly through the mind. While we're minding our own business, thoughts of self-doubt pop up out of nowhere. Things like, I'm not good enough, or I'll never be successful. Whether it's self-doubt, fear, or anxious thoughts, if we can observe when they come in and pause, we've accomplished the first step. As we become more aware and have the ability to reprogram how we structure our thoughts, when we catch ourselves in the moment and pause, we can start to reframe those thoughts into powerful statements that work for us and not against us. And again, what we believe becomes our truth. So let's keep this process simple and effective, and let it only take seconds to accomplish. When we take accountability for our thoughts, our actions get easier to make. Once we know how we want to replace one set of thinking into another, we're moving towards personal success. Now let's get into step 2. Dig into the root cause of the thought. This activity happens at 2 different times. The first time is when you're able to reflect on those reoccurring thoughts that come in. And if you're observing repetitive thoughts that bring you down, stay in observation mode and get into the origin of where this comes from. Now, this can get really deep, because this is actually what shadow work is, when we take a moment and really get in and reflect on the origin of things. So we want to take really small steps here. Most of the time, that resistance is going to be based on fear. So you can start by asking yourself, well, what am I really afraid of? What am I really resistant to? What's really holding me back? And let's continue with those earlier examples of I'm not good enough, or I'll never be successful. And aside from starting something new and knowing that being a beginner might kind of suck until we get better, we should give ourselves some grace. And with anything, it's just a matter of taking the time to practice so that we get good at it. So with the statement, I'm not good enough, this is really about how we perceive our value. I'm not good enough is a sabotaging and fearful statement that keeps us small. We do this so that we stay safe from getting hurt by being vulnerable or getting exposure. Let's look at I'll never be successful. This is another resistant statement to being anxious of future successes, or that we won't be able to make our desires come true. Life happens, and success is a vague word. So it's all in how we define our success that becomes the most important aspect when we're looking at shifting our beliefs. The second is in the actual moment of when it comes up. So when we're in the moment of anxiety, we're in the moment of fear, and those thoughts start coming in, this is the time we want to look at. We'll look at that in a second. And this is where real alchemists do their best work, and they transform one thing into another, and you transform the shadow into the light. So this takes us into step 3, reframe the old belief into a new one. So after you've observed, reflected on those recurring thoughts, you can start to reword them to more empowering statements. So we'll keep with those same 2 examples. Let's turn the statement of I'm not good enough to something more empowering, like I'm good enough to get started, or I'm good enough at this moment, or I'm good enough for myself. Come up with a statement that can elevate you into a realistic one and meet you where you're at. To take on an affirmation or a statement to say something like, you're the greatest in the world, might only apply to a handful of people, like an athlete, and can feel a little bit like an exaggeration if we start there. We want to find statements that reframe our thoughts that we can also believe and hold on to. So play around with these statements and see how they apply to each situation, because they might change just a little bit, and you want to have them apply to where you're at and not feel forced. So let's get into that bonus step 4, alchemizing those emotions. So I know it can be challenging to change emotions. So let's break it down. The flip side of anxiety is anticipation, and the flip side of fear is really freedom. When we get scared about anything that's in the unknown, and how we perceive that unknown will trigger our nervous system. If we can start to understand ourselves when that emotion pops up, and we can shift that potent energy a few degrees to the other side, we're now being in charge and being able to decide how we want to respond and react when those emotions come up. So fear and anxiety are very powerful energies. If we can slow down in those moments and observe what's going on within us, we can start to convert that emotion and redirect that energy in the way that we want for ourselves. That's an alchemist. This is what a true alchemist does. And they train themselves to observe and build that awareness and then decide where they want to shift it. You want to take that fear to the unknown and you want to apply it into potential of moving forward to your future successes. Again, what we believe is our truth. So if we decide that we want to keep this process simple, it'll be effective. And once we build that awareness of what's going on and it becomes clear, with practice, it only takes a few seconds to accomplish. Repetition on reframing thoughts will replace the old ones into new ones and will stay with you for the long haul. This can be easy if you allow it to be. Thanks for being here. Make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.